Hi there, everyone. My name is Kristen Nunez. I had chapter 18, and I will be talking about the urinary system. All right, so to get right into it, we will describe the general functions of the urinary system. There are going to be four main ones. The first one is going to be regulating blood volume and blood pressure. It regulates plasma concentrations of sodium, potassium, chloride, and other ions. It also helps to stabilize blood pH and helps conserve valuable nutrients. All right, so what are the major organs in the urinary system and their overall function? So, some of the major organs in the urinary system consist of the kidney. This produces urine, the ureter, which transports urine toward the urinary bladder, and then the urinary bladder, which temporarily stores urine before urination, and then the urethra, which conducts urine to exterior in males, and it also transports semen. Okay, in this slide, we will describe the location of the kidneys. So the kidneys are going to be located on either side of the vertebral column between the last thoracic T12 and the third lumbar or L3 vertebrae. The right kidney sits a little lower than the left kidney. The superior surface of each kidney is capped by an adrenal gland, and the kidneys and adrenal glands lie between the muscles of the dorsal body wall and the peritoneal lining. This position is called retroperitoneal because the organs are behind the peritoneum. All right, so now we will describe the external gross anatomy of the kidneys. Also, that includes the fibrous capsule, the adipose tissue, and the fibrous outer layer. So the kidney is encased by a fibrous capsule. It is going to be padded by adipose tissue and held within a fibrous outer layer. So the fibrous capsule can also be known as the renal capsule. It is going to be a thin, dense connective tissue layer, and it tightly adheres to the kidney surface. It also provides structural support and protection to the renal parenchyma. So adipose tissue, this is going to be a layer of fatty tissue that surrounds the renal capsule. Um, this adipose tissue, it acts as a cushion and helps to hold the kidney in position within the abdominal cavity. And then fibrous outer layer, this is going to be a thin connective tissue sheath. It encloses the kidney and its perirenal fat. It also provides support and helps to separate the kidney from surrounding structures. Okay, describe the two major regions of the kidney, including the following terms: the cortex, medulla, renal pyramids, renal columns, renal papilla, and the lobes. So, the two major regions of the kidneys are going to be the renal cortex, which is the outer layer, and then the renal medulla, which is the inner layer. So the renal cortex, this is going to be the outer layer of the kidney. It's where most of the blood filtration will happen, and it contains the glomeruli and convoluted tubules of the nephrons. The renal medulla, this is going to be like the inner part of the kidney. It's responsible for urine concentration, and it consists of multiple renal pyramids. Renal pyramids, these are going to be like cone-shaped structures within the medulla, and they're made up of collecting ducts and nephron loops, with their pointed ends projecting into the renal pelvis. Renal columns, these are going to be extensions of the renal cortex that extend between the renal pyramids. They act as a supportive framework for blood vessels. And then renal papilla, this is the apex of each renal pyramid where urine is collected before entering into the collecting ducts. And then the renal lobe, this is going to be like a single renal pyramid, and it surrounds cortical tissue and it forms a functional unit within the kidney. Okay, now we will talk about the internal gross anatomy of the kidneys, along with the calyx and the renal pelvis. So the internal gross anatomy of the kidneys is going to be like an outer renal cortex and an inner renal medulla. The renal pelvis is situated in the center and it collects urine from the medulla through funnel-like extensions called calyces. The minor calyces directly surround the renal papillae of the pyramids in the medulla, while multiple minor calyces converge to form larger major calyces. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. They then empty into the renal pelvis, which connect to the ureter to carry urine away from the kidney. So calyx, this is going to be like a cup-shaped structure that surrounds the renal papilla of each medullary pyramid. It also collects urine directly from the collecting ducts. And then the renal pelvis, this is going to be a funnel-shaped cavity within the kidney where urine is collected from the major calyces before being transported to the ureter. And this is going to be located in the renal sinus and in the cavity within the kidney. Here we are going to trace the path for blood flow through the kidneys. So blood enters the kidney through the renal artery. It then branches into smaller vessels called afferent arterioles, which lead to the glomerulus where filtration occurs. And then blood then leaves the glomerulus via efferent arterioles, and then it flows through the patibulary capillaries around the nephron tubules for reabsorption. And then finally, it's going to exit the kidney through the renal vein, returning to the systemic circulation. All right, here we will talk about the term nephron and describe the structures and functions of the following: the glomerulus, Bowman's capsule, proximal convoluted tubule, nephron loop, and distal convoluted tubule. So what is a nephron? A nephron is going to be the functional unit of the kidney. It's responsible for filtering waste products from the blood and forming urine. So it also consists of a glomerulus enclosed by a Bowman's capsule, followed by a proximal convoluted tubule, the loop of Henle, and a distal convoluted tubule. They all work together to regulate the composition of urine through filtration, reabsorption, and the secretion process. So what is the glomerulus? It's going to be a network of tiny blood capillaries within the Bowman's capsule where the filtration of blood occurs. Small molecules like water, electrolytes, and waste products are forced out of the blood into the Bowman's capsule, while larger molecules like proteins remain in our blood. The Bowman's capsule. This is a cup-shaped structure that surrounds the glomerulus, capturing the filtered fluid from the glomerulus and directing it into the convoluted tubule. Proximal convoluted tubule. This is going to be a coiled segment of the nephron tubule. This is where most of the reabsorption of essential nutrient water. Nephron loop. This is a loop extending into the renal medulla. It's primarily responsible for further concentration of urine by transporting sodium ions, and it creates a concentration gradient that draws water out of the filtrate. Distal convoluted tubule. This is going to be another coiled segment of the nephron tubule where fine-tuning of the urine composition occurs through selective reabsorption and secretion of ions and other substances based on the body's needs. Next, we will describe the collecting system. So the collecting duct system in the kidney is a network of tubules that connect multiple nephrons together. It collects the filtrate produced by each nephron and it delivers it to the renal pelvis as urine. The collecting duct is going to be the final part of this system. It receives filtrate from the distal convoluted tubules of several nephrons, and it allows for further modification of urine composition through reabsorption and secretion before it exits the kidneys. Here we will describe the function of the blood vessels associated with the nephron. So they function to filter waste products from the blood by allowing small molecules like water and urea to pass through their thin walls into the nephron tubule while retaining larger molecules like proteins and blood cells. So pretty much they are like cleaning the blood as it flows through the kidney. The glomerulus performs the initial filtration while the peritubular capillaries facilitate reabsorption of necessary substances back into the bloodstream along the nephron tubule. All right, here we will list the three processes that occur in the nephron. So the first one we'll discuss is the glomerular filtration. This is going to be the initial step where blood is filtered into the glomerulus and it removes waste products and small molecules into the Bowman's capsule to form filtrate. The second one is tubular reabsorption. This is in the renal tubule. Useful substances like water, glucose, and electrolytes are reabsorbed from the filtrate back into the bloodstream. The third one is tubular secretion. This is going to be the final step where additional waste products are actively transported from the blood into the filtrate within the renal tube. Next, we will describe filtration as the movement of fluid through a layer of cells. This is going to be the process where fluid moves through a semi-permeable barrier formed by a layer of cells. It allows smaller molecules like water and certain solutes to pass through, while larger particles like cells and large proteins are retained based on their size and charge, driven by a pressure difference across the cell layer. A way to remember this is you can kind of think of it as a strainer you use in the kitchen to strain noodles or meat because it selectively filters the fluid passing through. All right, next we will define glomerular filtration rate and list factors in the body that affect it. So this is going to be a measure of how well the kidneys are functioning by indicating the rate at which blood is filtered through the glomeruli. Um, the tiny structures within the kidneys are responsible for filtering waste products from the blood. Some factors that affect glomerular filtration rate include blood pressure, the diameter of the afferent and efferent arterioles, plasma protein concentration, and the permeability of the glomerular membrane, which can be also impacted by conditions that we know of, like diabetes or even high blood pressure. All right, describe reabsorption and secretion, including where they occur in the nephron. So, reabsorption is the process of taking back useful substances like water, glucose, and electrolytes from the filtrate fluid in the tubule and returning them to the bloodstream. This is primarily occurring in the proximal convoluted tubule. Versus secretion, this is movement of waste products, ions from the blood into the filtrate, and this is happening mostly in the distal convoluted tubule and collecting ducts of the nephron. All right, describe the effects of ADH on the distal convoluted tubule and collecting ducts. So it increases their permeability to water, leading to increased water reabsorption from the filtrate back into the bloodstream, which results in a more concentrated urine and helping to maintain fluid balance in our body. So pretty much a way to remember this is that ADH allows more water to be reabsorbed in these segments to the nephron when present, while a lack of ADH results in dilute urine production. Okay, describe the function and structure of the juxtaglomerular complex. This is going to be located near the glomerulus in the kidney. It is responsible for regulating blood pressure by monitoring sodium levels in the distal convoluted tubule and controlling the release of renin, a key enzyme in the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. So from there, it then triggers a cascade of enzymatic reactions leading to the production of angiotensin, which is a potent vasoconstrictor that causes blood vessels to narrow and raise blood pressure. This process can also stimulate the adrenal glands to release aldosterone, which will promote sodium and water reabsorption in the kidneys, and it contributes to an increased blood volume. Describe the renin-angiotensin system, including the stimulus for activation, the enzymatic pathway in the body, and the resulting effects in the body. So this is going to be a hormonal pathway responsible for regulating blood pressure by controlling fluid volume through the release of renin from the kidneys in response to low blood pressure. All right, so next we'll describe the location, growth structure, and function of the urinary bladder, including the internal urethral sphincter. So the urinary bladder, it is going to be a hollow muscular organ situated in the pelvic cavity. It functions as a temporary storage reservoir for urine and expands when filled with contractions to expel urine through the urethra. The internal urethral sphincter is going to be a smooth muscle at the bladder neck that controls the flow of urine by involuntarily contracting. Next, we will describe the location and histology of the external urethral sphincter and control by the nervous system. So, it is going to be a circular muscle located at the distal end of the urethra. It is deep within the perineal pouch and is composed of primarily skeletal muscle fibers, which allow for voluntary control via the pudendal nerve. When contracted, it compresses the urethra to prevent urine leakage. Describe the location, growth structure, and function of the urethra. Compare the structure of the urethra in the female and male. So the urethra is a tubular passage located at the base of the bladder. The female urethra is significantly shorter and simpler in structure compared to the male urethra, which is divided into distinct regions based on its anatomical course through the prostate, pelvic floor, and penis. The urethra functions to carry urine from the bladder to the outside of the body through its opening at the external genitalia. All right, guys, in this last slide, we will talk about the pathway for urine flow out of the body. So the kidneys produce urine, which travels through the ureters to the bladder where it is stored, and then it'll finally exit the body through the urethra. So essentially, the flow is from the kidneys to the ureters to the bladder and then out through the urethra. All right, perfect. That will conclude my presentation on the urinary system. Thank you guys so much for listening.